I'm going to do a quick video on scrolling and using a scroll jig. What I'm doing today is making more of these double scrolls. I tried to do a video yesterday showing making these ones, but it was a pretty rubbish video, so I deleted it and have another go today. The principle is the same with both types of scrolls, though these ones are just a fraction different in that they're doubled up in the middle. So I have lengths of steel that I've cut up, which I know are the right length to make these. Here's the length undoubled, that's the length doubled up. I'm going to explain all this before I light up the gas forge. I'm using a gas forge for these rather than a coal forge. I won't go into the reasons why, but it's just better for this kind of work. So it's quite noisy, so I'll just quickly explain it all before the noise of it drowns everything else out. The process is you double the steel up like this, and you curl the edges over slightly at the end to allow you to grip the hot metal onto the jig, and then you use your jig to shape the metal into these, which so that you get everyone looking the same. Now this is the jig that I'm going to be using. It's that's a better angle of it. So the idea with jigs is you draw out a shape that you want. So this is obviously not the shape, the size of it or anything, but this is explaining the process. You draw out your shape that you want, and then you hand forge some steel to fit within the shape that you want, so that when you get some hot steel and wrap it around, it comes out to this shape. So basically your jig is undersized to fit in. You get this stuff hot, you wrap it around, and then hopefully it all comes out like this. Now when you use a jig, what you have to do is you start from in the middle and you wrap it around like this, and when the steel comes off it, it's going to come off in this sort of raised up profile. So what you have to do then is bring it over to a fly press and use this sort of setup which I made the other day, which is basically a couple flat bits of steel, and like I say, the metal's going to be all raised up at angles, so you bring your fly press down and it squishes it all down into the same plane, into the flat plane, and then it fits in like this. So in Blue Peter fashion, here's one I made earlier, and I've got, how many more? There's I think there's 24 in total that I've got to do, so my powers of deduction make that 23 left to go. Right, I'll pause this and carry on when the metal's hot. So the first part of this, as I said, is just curling the tips of the metal over by hand off the edge of the anvil, which helps to get the metal to take on the jig shape. I'll show you what I mean. So that might need some more, but the point of this is that it helped me to grip it onto the jig. I'm going to just pause that now. Now normally I'd work on both ends of this at the same time, but just for now, for the sake of showing you, I'm just going to do one end of this. Hopefully I'll set the camera up in a position, my phone up in a position where it's not going to get knocked into. So, there's the bit I've curled over. Get it onto the start position of the jig, pinch it on, and so there's the sort of first pass of it, and you can maybe just about see, if I hold it like that, you can see how it's sort of coming out raised up because the jig's raised up. So what I'll do in a bit is I'll take it to the fly press and flatten it down. It's worth pointing out that the steel's not actually as hot as the camera's making it look. And also I've quenched the end so I can hold on to it. And the main thing with using a scroll jig is to stop where, so I think you can just about see that it's sort of hot here but not hot here. It's not up here, and so you have to stop where it's not hot. If I carried on pulling it round, because it's not hot here and it is hot here, it would just bend off the jig up there rather than continuing to bend evenly around here. So like I said, I'd normally work on both sides of this at the same time, but just for the sake of showing you now, I'm not going to do that. It actually makes it more difficult not working on both at the same time because, anyway, I won't go into too much detail. I'm just going to pause that. So, that is pretty much the first pass. Now I'll get this off the jig and then get it hot and flatten it all down and then show you the result of that. So when the steel comes off the jig, it's all sort of raised up like this. So it goes under the fly press. A few bashes. And, oh, crumbs, sorry. And it comes flat. So now what I've got to do is get this other end hot, curl it round and work it back towards the middle. So now I'm working on the other end, I'm going to work it back into the middle. Once you've got to a certain point on the jig, you don't need anything to grip onto the jig anymore. The jig will do the job in itself of holding the material in place. And the trick to getting the material off the jig is to turn it back. So turning it this way tightens it up, turn it back that way, and it comes off. Hopefully I'm not missing any footage. My phone's had a couple little hissy fits, but hopefully it's all there. So it's getting there, but it's a bit lumpy bumpy at the minute, so it just needs a bit of tuning up. Because this material is so thin, it's quite hard to get it off the jig and maintain its shape. So knowing that, I've actually included another stage in this, which isn't normally a stage, and that is, if I spin this round, I've made what kind of looks like, sorry if this is coming out a bit disjointed, my phone's really having some tantrums. Like I was saying, I've made these sort of little frames, and these frames are ultimately, the internal dimensions of them match what the external dimensions of the scrolls should be. So if I get the whole thing hot and squish it into this frame, I know that it will fit into the gate in the proportions that it should fit. Checking it for evenness. When it gets put into position in the gate, it's all going to get tweaked. Anyway, so I'll pause that. So as I said, I've now obviously cooled this off. Because the last thing I did was put it into that frame to make sure the internal or the external dimensions of this would fit the proportions that it's got to fit in the gate. This should go in with relatively little cajoling. Anyway, they all get tweaked individually and made sure they all line up and whatnot. So that's not its final position, but that's how it's done.